All right, I think we'll go ahead and get things started here. So welcome to all of you joining here at the Wisconsin Energy Institute. Welcome to those joining through Zoom webinar. My name is Scott Williams. I'm the Research and Education Coordinator at the Wisconsin Energy Institute here. And if this is your first time joining us for one of our events, the Wisconsin Energy Institute's mission is to provide leadership at the UW-Madison campus for multidisciplinary research, education, and outreach efforts that accelerate the world's transition to clean energy systems and solutions. And the Forward in Energy Forum is part of our efforts here at WI to cultivate public understanding of energy issues. It's a monthly series that we hold in a hybrid format that brings together experts both on campus and off campus with the goal of encouraging cross-disciplinary dialogue to explore the important technical, social, political, and economic dimensions of a wide variety of clean energy innovations and topics. So for today's forum, we're proud to be part of a couple other campus initiatives and events that are taking place both this week and throughout the year. First, this forum is part of EarthFest, which is a week-long celebration organized by the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, as well as the Office of Sustainability. And you can see there are 40 plus, maybe even 50 events happening this week. Some have already concluded that started last Friday, but you can definitely go to earthfest.wis.edu to check out what's coming up for the rest of the week. And second, the inspiration for this particular forum was UW's 175th anniversary, the Semi-Centennial. I think I got that. You've probably seen events throughout the whole year, so that'll be concluding toward the end of this academic year here. As you'll hear from our panelists today, UW-Madison has a very rich and robust history when it comes to researching and developing solutions to society's energy challenges. So I look forward to hearing from our distinguished panelists who are leaders on campus in this area. But before we get to that, I do have a few other announcements. First, we want to acknowledge that the land that WI occupies, as well as all of UW-Madison, is the ancestral home of the Ho-Chunk people who have called this land Dejop since time immemorial. We recognize and respect the inherent sovereignty of the Ho-Chunk Nation and the other 11 Native nations within the boundaries of the state of Wisconsin. I encourage you all to learn more about and support the efforts of tribal nations in Wisconsin and beyond who are leading the transition toward clean and just energy systems. Next, I invite you all to come to the Wisconsin Energy Institute, and there's a few other spots participating on campus on Saturday, May 4th, from 10 to 1 for Family Gardening Day. So we'll have lots of hands-on activities for learners of all ages to explore research in plants, bioenergy, ecology, and more. There'll also be tours of our building as well as free plants that you can take home. So please check us out for that. And finally, a few logistical notes. We'll have opening remarks from our moderator and our panelists and some Q&A with our moderator as well before taking audience questions. We'll try to alternate between in-person and online questions. If you're in the room, we can either repeat your question or bring the mic to you. If you're online, please submit a question in the Q&A box and we'll do our best to respond to that question. And finally, if you're online and you need live captioning, you can toggle that feature by clicking on the Show Captions button in Zoom. If you have any other technical concerns online, please use the chat box. And with that, I'm pleased to welcome our Associate Director here at the Wisconsin Energy Institute, Mary Blanchard, who will moderate today's panel and will provide an overview of campus energy research and where WI sits among all the great work in this area. So Mary has been with WI since 2014, so happy 10-year anniversary. Overseeing the day-to-day operations of WI and leading strategic efforts to grow WI's impact on campus and around the state. She also brings 20 years of industry experience prior to joining WI, most recently as Director of Marketing and Governmental Affairs at Virent. So welcome, Mary.
Thanks so much and welcome everyone. We're so happy to have so many people here in the room and people online who are interested in this topic today. So it's really a pleasure to have you here. What I wanted to do, those folks who are here in the room have had the chance to go to a photo gallery to see some of the historical photos of UW and also some of the people who are currently working in the energy space. So that's, here in the building, but I wanted to share some of these photos. If I'm doing this right. Can you help me here, Scott? Oh, there we go. Oh, okay. Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. To share some of the photos from the history of energy at UW. From looking way back, the very first energy-related department was the Department of Electrical Engineering, which was founded in the late 1800s, and it's only advanced since then. UW was home to the first solar energy lab, founded in the 1950s, and led by Farrington Daniels. So there's some historical photos here of that effort. Let's see. It's got, sorry, I'm really going to have trouble with this. Okay. Here's a student working with the nuclear reactor in 1955. I also included this Bradger Bass solar lamp that is a Wisconsin product from the early 20th century. It's not actually a UW invention, but I thought it was pretty cool to have a bike lamp that was using solar power way back then. So I wanted to share that as well. This is the Department of Atmospheric, Oceanic, and Space Sciences built the building when it was first built in 1969 and what it looks like today. And check out all those satellites. And I think Tracy's very familiar with all the equipment that's on the top of that building. Here's an electrical engineering class back in the early part of the 1900s. And the Engine Research Center, which was founded in the mid-1940s as well. Here's a researcher with an oscilloscope. So again, we're focusing a lot on the electrical engineering side of things, and also some equipment that was recording solar radiation. So circa 1935. So I did want to just share some of those highlights with the online audience as well. Whoops. And now I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of energy research now here at UW. UW gets a lot of funding from the U.S. Department of Energy. We are actually ranked 5th in university funding for, all across the nation, which is pretty significant. And we've been in the top 5 for at least the past 15 years or so, as far back as I've looked. To get that information, we're the 2nd largest university recipient of DOE's Office of Science funding. So that's more fundamental research funding as well. The campus also gets energy-related research funding from the National Science Foundation, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Department of Defense, and many interagency programs. So this is something that really reaches all across campus, from the College of Ag and Life Sciences, in the College of Engineering, Letters in Science. There are people doing energy-related research in the School of Medicine and Public Health, right? Things you wouldn't necessarily expect as an average citizen, but also in the Nelson Institute for Environmental Studies, Little Follett School, the Vice Chancellor for Research, and the School of Pharmacy. So this is something that just really reaches all across campus. I wanted to highlight some of the centers that there are at UW now. In biofuels production and combustion, we have the Center for Integrated Ag Systems, Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center, which is headquartered here at the Wisconsin Energy Institute, and then the Engine Research Center. Gosh, I'm sorry, this somehow didn't translate very well, did it? Sorry for the formatting problems. Research in nuclear with the Fusion Technology Institute and the Wisconsin Institute of Nuclear Systems, the Solar Energy Research Lab, which we saw some pictures of from before, electricity production with the Wisconsin Electric Machines and Power Electronics Consortium, the Wisconsin Public Utility Institute, which is focused on education issues in the electricity sector, PSERC, the Energy Systems, Materials and Manufacturing at the Granger Institute, Policy and Environment with the SAGE, the Center for Sustainability and the Global Environment at the Nelson Institute. We have interdisciplinary research at the Wisconsin Institutes for Discovery, plastics upcycling, water research, atmospheric science research, and then multiple groups that are doing work in materials, which also can be energy related as you think about new types of battery materials or other materials that if we can lessen the weight of certain types of things like cars, it can make them more energy efficient. So, and there's a consortium focused on advanced materials as well. So, really a wide variety of research happening here on campus. At the Wisconsin Energy Institute, we have a research funding budget of $31 to $32 million a year. again, coming from a variety of agencies. We've had a tremendous number of publications, especially through Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center, a large number of patent applications, technologies being licensed or optioned, and then 7 startup companies, and then a wide variety of faculty that have research in this building or affiliates who are connected with research that we're doing here. Across campus, we have an additional 134 energy experts in a variety of different spaces and 52 full-time staff here. And then I just wanted to finally share there are a number of active startup companies or UW spinoffs coming from somewhere on campus, not all sourced here at the Energy Institute, but from somewhere on campus that are doing work in a wide variety of energy areas, from Virent, which is commercializing a technology that converts plant sugars into fuels and chemicals, to a company doing direct air capture and sequestering the carbon in green cement. Companies that are in the nuclear space like Type 1 Energy and Shine and Rialta Fusion, companies doing water desalination, companies, again, looking at commercializing technologies for bio-based components of paints and thinners, or even new battery materials, or even new types of engines. So really a lot of exciting research happening here at UW. So I wanted to give that overview. And now I'd like to introduce our really expert panel and just say, it's really quite an honor to have these 4 folks who've been so pivotal in energy research and really leading the energy space. And there are other people in the audience too who've been just major players in energy here on campus. So it's just an honor to have this group here to have this discussion today. So I'm going to go from right to left in terms of the introductions. First of all, I'd like to introduce Wes Fell, who is a retired UW-Madison professor in engineering and environmental studies. He was also founder of Resource Management Associates. As a faculty member, Wes taught and conducted research in the College of Engineering and the Nelson Institute. In the 1970s, his Energy Analysis and Policy Research Group conducted energy scenario analysis on the state of Wisconsin. It led to the development of a state energy model and the first Wisconsin energy database, eventually taken over by the Wisconsin State Energy Office, which is now part of the Public Service Commission. He is also the co-founder of UW's Energy Analysis and Policy Program in 1980. So welcome, Wes. Thanks for being here. Next, I'd like to introduce Mike Cordini, who is the Wisconsin Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Nuclear Engineering and Engineering Physics. He is a mechanical and nuclear engineer with research interests centered primarily in thermohydraulics and multi-phase flow. He especially emphasizes the areas of reactor operation, reactor safety, reprocessing, and recycle and risk assessment. He is the former director of the Wisconsin Energy Institute and former director of the College of Engineering's Wisconsin Institute of Nuclear Systems. He's a member of the National Academy of Engineering and past president of the American Nuclear Society. Thanks for being here today, Mike. Next, I'd like to introduce Tracy Holloway, who is the Jeff Rudd and Jean Bissell Professor of Energy Analysis and Policy and Professor of Environmental Studies and Atmospheric and Oceanic Sciences. She is an air quality scientist working at the intersection of air quality, energy, climate, and public health. She serves as a team lead for the NASA Health and Air Quality Applied Sciences team, which connects NASA data with stakeholder interests in air quality management and public health. She is also the chair of the Energy Analysis and Policy Graduate Certificate Program in the Nelson Institute. She is also a co-founder and served as the first president of the Earth Science Women's Network, which has a mission of supporting the scientists of today and welcoming a diverse community of scientists for tomorrow. Thanks, Tracy. And finally, I'd like to introduce Tim Donahue, who is the director of both the Wisconsin Energy Institute and the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center. He is the Ira L. Baldwin Professor of Bacteriology and UW Foundation Fetzer Bascom Professor. He is an internationally recognized expert on bio and genome-based conversion of renewable resources into valuable products. He's a AAAS fellow and a fellow of the American Academy of Microbiology. Since 2007, he served as the principal investigator and director of Great Lakes Bioenergy, a U.S. Department of Energy Office of Science funded renewable fuels and chemicals research center. So welcome to you all. Thanks for being here. All right. So the way the format will work today is that each of our panelists are going to give 5 to 7 minutes of comments on the question, how did you get into the energy space? So we're going to get to hear their origin story. So we're going to start with Wes. You can use this one.
Okay. Thank you for that. It's really an honor to, can you hear me okay? It's really an honor to be here with these distinguished teachers and researchers. As Mary said, we'll probably have about 5-7 minutes to talk, but I thought that since from the introduction, you can tell I go back a few more decades than the other people. So in fact, about 6, so maybe I could have an extra minute or 2 since I have probably a little bit of stuff. But also, Mary posed the question about how we got into it. So I thought I'd tell you a little anecdote from my childhood. I grew up in Elgin, Illinois, which is on the way to O'Hare. And my dad, I was a grade schooler at that time. My dad in 1941 was insulating our attic because the roof, there was no insulation in the house. The roof was not insulated, so the attic was very cold, and he wanted to put some insulation on the floor of the attic to stop the heat going from the rest of the house. And that time, fiberglass had just been invented in 1938. So Dad was apparently an early adopter. In 3 years, it's a little hard to believe. So I was up there helping him put it in, and we had a little radio up there that was listening to. It was on a Sunday. It was on a Sunday afternoon, and then I came down and took a break. You know, I was 6 or 7 years old, and Dad came down and said something. Did you know? I just heard that the Japanese invaded Pearl Harbor. It was December 7th, 1941. And that's one of my earliest remembrances of doing some energy work. So I go quite far back, and I'm glad that insulation is still important. And it was only 3 years. Insulation came in very quickly in those days. So anyway, I'm going to just talk a little bit about, we'll go from 1941 to 1970, which it's about, I was at 54 years. And I consider that that's when I really got into the energy field. I did teach in nuclear engineering department, fast reactor work and so forth. And I studied engineering physics and so forth. But this Earth Day was a huge campus celebration here. It's the biggest event I've ever seen on the Madison campus. Perhaps the student protests and the Dow Chemical might have been bigger, but the biggest academic thing. There were communities all over the city. Schools, institute, every department, almost a huge number of professors, all on the Earth Day, which was there was a 10-day celebration, quite incredible, and I think it sparked the interdisciplinary work at the UW-Madison as nothing has ever done before. So I gave a little insignificant lecture on nuclear radiation and so forth. But it culminated in a giant event at the Stock Pavilion. There was no Cole Center and these other places. Stock Pavilion was when you had a big event. And Gaylord Nelson, the founder of Earth Day, was here. Several people from Washington came. Senator Mike Gravel from Alaska, right? And I have to mention one of the speakers was a young graduate student, law student named Paul Soglin. Some of you may have heard of Paul. He was 4 or 5 terms as mayor. So how he got on that agenda, I don't really know, but
Flamingos on Bascom.
Right, he put flamingos on Bascom Hill. So anyway, it was a great, they had some lights and they had the Oz. I don't know, the Oz was a big rock band at that time, but it was a big event. And that really, for me, crystallized that energy was going to play a big role in the future. So that got me into things. As a result, in 1972, I and several other professors started an energy research program. It's not a very good acronym, ESPRG, Energy Policy Research Program. I can't even remember what it was, to tell you the truth, but we built a database, as Mary said, the first energy database, and we started to develop models and built scenarios for the state of, we were very focused on the state of Wisconsin. And that was a transformative experience for me in getting into the energy field. We built models. At that time, there was a model that was built by the Club of Rome and let's see, what do we call it? Limits to Growth was a group that used system dynamics, and they had about 5 variables, and they predicted all sorts of problems. And so we were quite modest with our model because there was an engineering statistics professor here by the name of George Box. You may have heard of him, but he had one proverb which is very well known. All models are wrong, but some are useful. And that is very true, and I think we learned from George. So that program went on. We had professors from the John Mitchell from the Solar Lab, Charlie Giacchetti from economics, many people that you might know, Steve Bourne, so on. 2 of our staffs went on to the state energy office and PSC. Charlie Giacchetti became the chair of the PSC, which was very influential. And Steve Bourne, professor, became head of the new energy office. So the research was really a Wisconsin idea type of example, which fed into state energy policy very much at that time. I won't say much more about it, but then that project was some degree internationalized. I went to an institute in Vienna called the International Institute for Applied Systems Analysis, IASA, another bad acronym, but it was founded by Premier Kosygin of Russia and President Johnson as a first step détente among scientists. And it kind of internationalized the Wisconsin work. Our models were sort of taken up and we worked. I spent a lot of time in East Germany at that time, trying to apply the model to a socialist economy. So that was the next step, which internationalized, and then we had future projects, a Wisconsin project in Mexico. Governor Lucy became President Carter's ambassador to Mexico at that time, and we got this Rockefeller grant to work there, and that was quite an adventure. We had a big USAID project that brought a lot of Indonesian students here, and they became, I'm going a little further, they became top energy officials in Indonesia. So that was exciting. So then the last thing I talk about is the origins of the energy analysis and policy program here at Wisconsin. And I think Tracy will follow up as she's the chair of that program now. But it was set up in 1980 by many of these faculty that I mentioned earlier that had been involved in the research. Not all in our group. I mean, George Bunn was a law professor involved in energy. He wangled $50,000 from the legislature to help support the program initially. And it started with research and teaching. And so a lot of courses, a lot of research, and it brought people together. And now I think this has been a great program, and Tracy will talk about it. It now has, I think, some 50 or so students, is that right? And she'll talk a little bit more about that. So that's where I'll end. I've taken a little more of my time than necessary, but I think we'll have time to talk about the future. And you're probably better placed to talk about the future than I am. But I am very positive about the future, mainly because of the people that are involved in energy research here and the students and faculty. Thanks for listening.
All right, I'll turn it over to Mike, and if you wanted to use the microphone there, yeah.
Does it work? We can't tell.
Can you look and see if the green light is on? The green light is on.
Green button's on. Okay, so I'll give back some time. So I've been doing research in the area of fluid mechanics and heat transfer for a long time, not as long as Wes. It's a compliment, I guess. In fact, I was doing a calculation at 175 years. That means I've been at Madison 25% of 175 years. So you do that calculation. I originally came from Sandia Labs. I was working at Sandia in the area of nuclear safety, and came here to Madison doing work in safety analysis. I expanded my work doing a whole bunch of things, but I wanted to bring information from two other areas. Mary made a mention of it in the slides. One is the combustion center, the engine research center. you had a picture of Otto Yahara and Phil Myers up there. So Otto and Phil came here in the 40s, 46 to be as an example, and started the Engine Research Center. The other one was Jack Duffy and Farrington Daniels that started the Solar Energy Lab in 1955, I think. And so about that time, nuclear engineering started. Wes was one of the original faculty in the department. The program started in 57, became a department in 63, and so I joined in 81. I won't go through all the things that I've done. I've had a lot of fun things to do. The one thing I wanted to mention, though, is in 1999, Chancellor Wiley, if you remember his name, came up with the idea of essentially the cluster hires. It was an idea of essentially expanding into areas that were cross-disciplinary at the campus. And one of the areas was energy sources, systems, and policy. And so it hired 4 faculty, 2 of which are sitting in the room, Professor Wilson and Professor Holloway, as well as Bernie Lasutra from electrical engineering and Greg Nemeth, who's in the La Follette School. I was just told that he's now in charge of the La Follette School. So those were the 4 energy cluster hires to begin with. We were lucky enough to hornswoggle the chancellor at the time to give us 2 more hires, and Mario Trujillo and Franklin Miller joined us in mechanical engineering. But I think that's a good example of what we do at Madison, which is we find ways to get things done in spite of the rules. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. And so I think the energy cluster hire was a good example of interdisciplinary work. I think Paul and Tracy and Bernie and Greg have been working together in various areas since the 2000 timeframe. I think Paul joined in 2001, Tracy the year after, or something of that order, and Bernie and Greg joined a couple years following. So that was one thing I guess I want to mention. The second thing I want to mention is that with Tim and a number of others, about 2004, 2005, it became a fad to have energy institutes. I use the word because that's the way I look at it. We were always doing work in energy, but it wasn't being recognized. And at that time, we went to Chancellor Wiley again, and I can't imagine what we said to him, but somehow we hornswoggled him into a bit of money, and we were able to start the Energy Institute. And about the same time, in fact, a year later, I was at a meeting in Boston in a hotel meeting, and I think Tim was in Washington, and I got a phone call from Tim. They had just been awarded the GLBRC. And so, 2007, a year later. And that was initiation of, I think, the largest research grant in the history of the campus, single grant, if I remember correctly. And so, again, it shows how we were able to do things across lines at the campus and very successfully. And I guess that's the one message I'd leave to all of you, is that at Madison, if you have an idea and you want to stay with it, independent of the rules, in spite of the rules, you can get something done.
Thank you, Mike. Well, really, it's such an honor to be here with all of you today and with this panel. Thank you for organizing it, Mary and Scott and Allison. I have been thinking about where to start my comments because they build on so much of what's been said, but maybe I'll give you a little preview to take you back to when I was in high school, which wasn't that long ago. I grew up in Chicago, and I really did not know what I wanted to do with my life. And I think this is very typical of a lot of the students that I work with here. I was interested in art. I edited the literary magazine. I thought maybe I'll give tours of Chicago. I don't know. Who knows? So when I got to undergrad, I did not know what I wanted to do. And I majored in applied math because I thought, well, that keeps doors open. I can do something different. And then one summer I worked at the Johnson Space Flight Center at NASA. And I thought, well, maybe I'll study the atmosphere. And I did, and I kept going, and I did my PhD in atmospheric and oceanic sciences. But then as I was looking at jobs, thinking about maybe I'll go to law school after I finish my PhD, I saw a job here in energy systems and policy. Growing up in Chicago, we would vacation in Wisconsin. We go canoeing in Wisconsin. And I thought, wow, I could work in Wisconsin, this like dreamland, you know? So I didn't necessarily think of myself as an energy person, but I studied chemicals in the atmosphere. And if we want to control what's in the atmosphere, really that means controlling our energy systems. So I thought, well, it's a bit of a stretch, but maybe they'll hire me. And I put my application materials together. And when I was invited for an interview, I decided that if I was competitive, even for an interview at a great school like UW-Madison, maybe I wouldn't go to law school. Maybe I was done with school. So I was hired here, and I did come in energy, but I was really coming from a different perspective because I didn't come from a nuclear engineering perspective. I was really coming from this, you know, policy, health, atmospheric science perspective. And honestly, it's been so exciting to be part of this energy community here. And I thought at first that I might not quite fit in. But little did I know that the energy culture that we had here had been fertilized and cultivated for decades by people like Mike and Wes. And actually, my PhD at Princeton was looking at policy implications of atmospheric models, and it was all predicated on the work of Fell et al., who had built the first ever energy system model in Asia. And so, in fact, when I was hired here, our mutual colleagues in Vienna at IASA said, "Oh, are you going to Wisconsin to work with Wes?" And I said, "Wes Fell is in Madison, Wisconsin? No way." It's like a celebrity. And here he is. And and in fact, I think the reason why the energy cluster hired someone like me into an energy position is because of this broader ranging vision of what it means to do energy research. And the idea that energy is not isolated to one discipline, like Mary said, but really cuts across the campus, and it has for a long time. So when 4 of us were hired, and since then there's been a bioenergy cluster, and there's been other faculty who've been hired through other initiatives, the Energy Analysis and Policy program that Wes launched in 1980 has always been the natural home for our community. And it's been growing as a community because any student in pretty much any graduate program on campus can dip their toe and maybe jump in on the deep end to the energy world by taking classes and participating in activities through the EAP program, and that's Energy Analysis and Policy. So EAP has been around for a very long time, but those of us who really, you know, were excited about it, we felt that it should be more than just something students happen to find when they come to Wisconsin. It should be out front. So when students anywhere in the world are thinking, where can they study energy at the graduate level, they think Wisconsin. And that they can come in through microbiology and EAP, or public policy and EAP, or law or engineering. They don't have to choose, like they do at some programs, whether to choose energy or a discipline. They can do both. And that philosophy has really gotten a boost, gas in the tank, a charge up, if you will, starting in 2018 when Scott Williams came on as our coordinator. And now we have Michael Camp leading engagement, and Paul Meyer, who used to be part of the Energy Institute in various forms, leading our industry engagement. And through this dream team, we have been growing. We now have 50 students. We are the largest in-person graduate certificate on campus. And we have sustained that momentum in part by reimagining what a certificate means. It's not just a collection of classes, but it's really a holistic experience that can complement a student's traditional education. So we take our students every spring to Chicago, where I get to lead them on a tour of Chicago like I thought I might do in high school. And we take them every fall to Milwaukee. We bring in partners. We're doing applied research. And really, it's spun into something that's more than a certificate. And so what does that future look like? we're envisioning different ideas. I submitted a request to Dean Paul Robbins to consider a center around EAP to hold the breadth of what we're doing. But whatever we become, right now it's been really exciting to be part of this engine that is really connecting students and researchers across campus and building on the great legacy that's been laid for decades.
So thanks, Tracy. So I'm a bit of an outlier at the table here because I'm a biologist. So I want to frame what I'm about to say with that as a perspective, because I'm probably going to give you some life stories and examples that you wouldn't necessarily have thought you were going to hear when you came to this event today. So as a biologist, she grew up in Chicago. I grew up in New York City, and I grew up right on the Atlantic Ocean with a mother and the father who never even graduated high school. My mother made it through 6th grade. My father made it through 8th grade. So I'm a first-generation college graduate. So if any of you are out there worried about you don't have the legacy to be at this table, put that away and you can do whatever you want to do. The other thing that framed where I am, the other thing that framed where I am was the fact that I grew up on the ocean. And I became very interested in surfing and the environment and seaside gin mills and hanging out and whatnot. But there were horrific events on the ocean that wiped out the boardwalk less frequently than they are now. And I became very interested in the environment biology interface. And I went off to school, and to skip all that I did as an undergraduate and a graduate student and a postdoc, in 1979, I went to do a postdoc at the University of Illinois in Urbana, and I started working on solar energy conservation. Not solar panels, but photosynthetic microbes who harvest light and conserve the energy in photons and use it to grow. And I interviewed for a job here in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, and I remember my department chair at the time, a gentleman by the name of Ron Hinsdale, walking me up to Ag Hall, and he said, okay, the dean is from soil science, and he's going to want to know how you are going to contribute to the mission of the ag school, right? And I said, well, I work on solar energy conservation. Oh, that makes sense, right? Photosynthesis. So I've been in the bacteriology department since 1986. And without talking about any of the wonderful things you think Mike thinks I may have done, I want to give you some examples of other contributions to the energy space that have come out of departments like that in collaboration across campus that I think are relevant to the energy space. So I don't know who it was, Mike or Tracy mentioned the word fertilize. So fertilizer, farmers put it on the land. It's 1% of the energy budget of the United States. Pioneering work 100 years ago in bacteriology and biochemistry, Winston Brill, in collaboration with a guy by the name of Ira Baldwin, who my chair happens to be named after, discovered there were microbes in the soil that fixed nitrogen and made ammonia, fertilizer out of it, and that could be used to feed plants. And 100 years ago and still today, farmers can buy adjuvant of those bacteria and put them on the soil with the hypothesis or the hope that it's going to decrease the amount of ammonia that they need to use. And if they use the right amount of ammonia, it costs them less, and they get less nitrous oxide, which is a nasty greenhouse gas. So there's one example. So now let's move forward to World War II. I still wasn't here. I wasn't even born. And in going through the departmental archives, as we moved out of the old building that I was hired in and moved around, we found a New York Times headline from World War II that said, Wisconsin Gal, G-A-L, produces solvents. And so this Wisconsin Gal, and I threaten anyone to put a headline in the New York Times today with that in it, was a woman by the name of Elizabeth McCoy, who discovered how to make industrial solvents that were needed in World War II more reproducible by using fermentation instead of using petroleum. So there's an example. She did that in collaboration with a gentleman by the name of Marv Johnson, who was in the biochemistry department. So now let's fast forward to, right before I was hired. In the late 70s, Wisconsin generates a lot of revenue from paper mills, paper processing. And there was a group in the Forest Products Lab in collaboration with colleagues in bacteriology, actually the guy who I replaced, doing something called biopulping, using microbes to soften wood so it was less energy intensive and less costly to process wood and make panels and fiberglass and things like that. And we now know that that process is basically softening the lignin in the wood. We didn't maybe know that well at the time, but the gentleman from the Forest Products Lab who had a joint appointment in bacteriology, another example of collaboration. He was a Fed who had a faculty appointment on campus and can train people. When Great Lakes Bioenergy was first started, said to us, he was on our advisory board, said, Tim, you know, you guys can make anything you want from lignin except money. So if you want to go try and figure out something to do with lignin, that's fine, but you're never going to make money out of it. And we're not there yet, but we are. And to fast forward, last week, a faculty member in the Energy Institute by the name of John Ralph won the Wallenberg Prize in Sweden, which, according to the press release, is the Nobel Prize in Forestry. So this is where this institute has come, with collaborations with people. We have John, we have Shannon Stahl, who's a National Academy of Science member, and it's really due to Mike's vision. He tries to give me a lot of credit, but if it wasn't for Mike, we wouldn't be here. And it is an example of how great minds on this campus can work together and get things done. There's a lot of buildings, but there's very low walls between the buildings. And you can collaborate and move the needle as much as you want, whether you're an 8th grader listening or have a kid and you're trying to figure out what they want to do. Let them do what they want to do and figure it out. Or whether you're a junior faculty member and you're trying to figure out what to do, this is a great place to do it.
All right, thank you all. What we're going to do is I have a few more questions for the panel, and then we'll turn it over to audience questions. All right. So the next question for you all is, if you were going to name one thing, what would you think is the university's most significant contribution to energy? So you'd like to go first?
You might guess what mine is. I think it's not one person, but I think it's the events like the Earth Day, which created this symbiosis for interdisciplinary work, which is now incredible. As all our speakers have mentioned, the walls are very low. I have to think back to Farrington Daniels, who was mentioned here as one of the fathers of solar energy, who was in the chemical engineering department. I think sometime he worked on the that picture up there, it's no longer there, on the Chicago reactor, the Dr. Pyle, but he really was a solar energy fanatic. And he got a big grant from the Rockefeller Foundation, I think in the about 1950 or so. And he built these solar cookers. I don't know if anybody's seen one, but I have one. Somebody went on one of my birthdays, my 0 birthdays, gave me this solar cooker one, and it's a kind of a cardboard thing with some aluminum things. And Farrington developed that and took it to somewhere in the Caribbean. I'm not sure which countries he's working in. And they were going to be, of course, cooking their meals with it. But he forgot, or nobody told them, that people there don't cook during the day. They're cooking at night. So, and the story is they didn't have an anthropologist on, on the team. And that's what we see today here at this campus, is that people are participating in these programs. For example, the EAP program that Tracy mentioned, and other ones with economists and political scientists, the La Follette Institute and the Business School and the Nelson Institute. So we have this great interdisciplinary team, which bodes very well anyway. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, was the Earth Day celebration.
Do we have to answer this? I guess I want to go back to what I said before. I think Madison is a place where if you have an idea, you can get it done with enough energy, and you can avoid the bureaucrats, which sometimes are called our leaders, to get it done. Energy is an example. I think Tim and I did some things together for the Energy Institute, but I can think of it in a whole bunch of ways. When we were talking, Tom Johns and I wanted to do things in engineering, and we just started talking about it and pushing, and we got it done. So I think to the extent that you have good people with good ideas and you give them the wherewithal to do it and get out of their way, it works very well at Madison.
Yeah, and I'll sort of add to that, that I think one thing that we have is the Wisconsin idea. And that is a value, that the role of the university is to engage in real issues in the state. And I think if you listen to some of the examples that have been shared, it's been these new ideas around energy were hatched to address applied problems right here in Wisconsin. And, you know, I think this idea that there's real problems in the world, and the expertise of the university and the way we train students can be used to solve those challenges, that is not a value at every university. In fact, sometimes applied problems are considered a little pedestrian, a little lowbrow, not quite, prestigious enough. But I think what my research is really motivated, and I feel like thrives in this environment that rewards engagement with real organizations, real problems, and really trying to move the needle on important problems like energy.
Yeah, so I have trouble with this question. Mary knows it, but we kept it because it's kind of like, I don't have any grandchildren yet, but it's kind of like asking someone who has 10 grandchildren, who's your favorite grandchild, right? It's very unfair. But I'll just go back to a one-word answer and just say collaboration. We would not be here if this place did not allow and even foster collaboration, because what we're dealing with are a series of very complicated problems, and no one person and no one discipline is going to come up with the solution. So if you look at all the examples that people have given, and I gave some, it's all because we were able and encouraged sometimes to collaborate.
You made the mistake of giving it to us.
I know, it's true. Well, what do you see as the future of energy research? I'm not going to give it to Wes this time. You're going to have to share the other one. Or we'll start with Tim.
So again, I'm going to be a little bit of an outlier and focus my answer on the non-electron future, right? So we think about energy, we think about lighting, we think about air handling, we think about what DOE calls static energy systems. I'm going to focus on transportation and the other part of the barrel of oil or of methane that's turned into chemicals. So there's a huge potential that the feds, not me, have written reports on, and experts that say there's a potential that 60% of the world's economy can be driven by biology. And that biology can make all the transportation fuels that we currently depend on. They can make many of the chemicals in the carpets. If any of you are wearing non-cotton shirts or clothing, they can make all of those things from renewable feedstocks. And I think there's a huge opportunity to decarbonize the Wisconsin idea and to decarbonize society if we really buy into being leaders in that space, especially in an agricultural state, because we have billions of tons, metric tons of feedstocks. If you think of dairy and biomass and municipal waste that we can convert into those materials.
Well, when I think about the future of energy, what I see is, or energy research on campus, is more voices, more people represented in this exciting and productive field. Because if you look at the photos that Mary showed, which I love all those historic photos, they're mostly engineers, they're mostly men, maybe all men, they're mostly white, maybe all white. But if you look at our campus, it is not mostly engineers. It is not mostly men. It is still mostly white, but hopefully changing. And so I think this idea that we have been using a sliver of the human capacity available to our campus on this problem. And I'm very excited to think about what are some on-ramps to bring people who are 18 or 23 or whatever age who might not have thought of themselves as an energy person into the energy mix. Because just because someone didn't grow up in high school thinking that they would solve an energy problem, actually that person is thinking about the problem in a new way that's different than others. So yeah, what I see when I think about what the future is going to look like is it's tapping into the wider scope of human potential that we campus and that we have in the world.
I don't know what I can say after all of that. Let me give you an example. The one thing I guess that is important, at least in terms of things that are going on in today's world, is it's not simply a technological problem, right? So I look at things, at least as an engineer, I hope we've been educated. You look at a problem and you actually work from the outside in. And the outside is not technical. The outside is social, humanistic. It has a whole bunch of ramifications that are beyond the technical aspects of it. And I think that's what I heard from what Tracy was saying. I totally agree that when you take any of the future problems, you're going to have a team, and the team can't just be strictly engineers or scientists. It's going to have to be a wide range of individuals. And my only one particular example of that is in energy is just citing of things. Social acceptance of energy solutions is becoming a bigger and bigger issue. I just follow the traffic and the news about what's acceptable and what's supposedly unacceptable in some areas. And a lot of it has to do with social acceptance. So I think it's a broad team.
Yeah, I don't know what I can add to that, and particularly with what the two of you have said about social involvement of many more people in this sector. And I think if you just look at the research that is going on in this area, for example, environmental justice, energy justice, we have huge programs going on. So I'd say that's really, I agree with what you said. There's one other aspect as kind of an energy analyst or a modeler. What we were doing in the 70s, I think you could compare it to the Model T Ford in terms of the sophistication with the computers and the data. And what I see now is incredible. It's more like the Tesla, I would say. The models, for example, that Morgan and Tracy and other people are using are just incredible, huge databases. So I think, I'm not going to say that AI is going to be the silver bullet to all this, but the data and the analysis is going to change the whole way we look at energy systems. I just had a heat pump put in, and going to hopefully next year get a plug-in automobile. And we're still at a primitive area that our thermostats and our MG&E billing isn't going to take account that we can do any load shifting, so we can use electricity when the solar is at its peak and so on. So there's just a lot to do. And I think so the two big things I think are going to be the justice and the computer sophistication and databases.
Good. Great. Well, we have a couple of online questions. I'm going to ask one of those now, and then for those in the audience, hopefully we'll move back and forth between online and in-person questions. So the first online question is, do you see a path for nuclear power production in Wisconsin? How could UW contribute to helping that happen?
Do I have to answer that? Maybe is the answer, is the honest answer. There's going to be a new Chief Strategy Officer at Dairyland Power, is coming in. He's one of our alums, actually, who ran essentially the Grant County Public Utility District, which is out in Washington State. And he essentially was one of those that was doing hydro and nuclear there. So maybe. I would say that what you're going to see a growth in, and Paul and I have been talking about this, there was an article in the New York Times about the growth in electricity demand because of data centers and advanced manufacturing. I think that's going to drive a lot of the energy growth in the United States, whether it be electricity or other forms of energy. But I think centering strictly on Wisconsin, it's a maybe.
All right. Are there any audience questions here in the room? And for those online, please enter your questions into the Q&A. Anyone here have a question? Yeah.
Hi, thank you guys for coming to this talk. So one of the very first things I learned while working in the Energy Institute is nothing is free. Everything has a cost. So in your vast experiences, what kind of hardships did you have to overcome and what kind of costs did you have to make to overcome these difficulties to become these giants that kind of carry our worlds as they are right now?
Well, that's a great question, and it can be answered in a lot of different ways. But maybe I'll start by talking about the costs of running the EAP program, because when I first joined here as a faculty, and the students would want to get together, they would ask the faculty to buy them a pizza, and sometimes Paul would buy the pizza. Sometimes he'd be like, "I got the pizza last time, Tracy. You get the pizza this time." And actually, that business model is not something that will work for a program that is really serving its students. And so we really thought, if this is something that campus feels is valuable, to have this connective tissue, and that our alumni feel is valuable, and that the Energy Institute feels is valuable, and the Nelson Institute feels is valuable, then let's get together and make a plan. And what we've done is tried to think about, what is the value proposition? There's a cost, but there's a value. And we need to be articulating the value. And then we need to figure out who values that. And so starting around 2017 or 2018, we had super valuable support from the Wisconsin Energy Institute, valuable support from the Nelson Institute, valuable support from key donors and alumni. And then we started thinking about, how do we connect with businesses? How do we connect with federal funds? How do we build kind of a system that generates more value and finds revenue that will support that value? And so I'd say that's really the upward spiral that we're on right now, of trying to not just say, this is what we want to do, here's how much it will cost, but really to focus on the value proposition and to think about who wants that investment. And I think that is a way, at least, to sort of, in our experience, turn the problem of getting funding and bearing a cost into an opportunity for growth. And I think at the individual level, I would say that a lot of my own personal growth has come during the times when I've been feeling the most spent out. And so I think that this idea that costs can be an upside or a downside, and that's just one example to that great question. Thank you.
So I guess in my case, I'm going to be a little Pollyanna and say that I don't think I had to give up too many sacrifices. And that's because I feel like I love this job, right? And it gets me out of bed, keeps me up, keeps me working on the weekends, puts me on planes. And I love this job because I love seeing young people get excited about what they're doing and helping us move the needle. Everything that we're doing now, including coming back to Tracy's wonderful answer, I've been a little bit distracted from some of my day jobs because we're working in the last 3 weeks. with 4 minority serving institutions to get workforce development grants from DOE on this campus that can only work with Great Lakes Bioenergy. And boy, that is rejuvenating for somebody who's been here for as many years as I've been here and has tried to realize the dream that Tracy put out there. And I'll put as many hours into that as I can, right? Because it keeps me invigorated about what we're doing. And that's what gets us out of bed every morning, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with what you said. And I always feel in the work I was doing here, that's incredible that we get paid for what we're doing because we're enjoying it so much, this work. But I had a little example. I don't know if this is quite on the topic, but in the 70s, in the mid to late 70s, we recognized the problems of energy, but the getting grants, we got good grants at that time to do the work, but it still was a slow process. Writing, I think everybody sitting here knows about that process. So we decided to start a small consulting company. That's very common today, I think, much at the universities. I mean, there are all sorts of startups and so on. It was not very common at that time, actually. It was going on. And we started a little, as it said in the bio, we started a little company called Resource Management Associates. It could be ideally located in Madison because we had students and faculty just itching to work on some of these problems, but maybe they couldn't get a grant for it. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that you can overcome some of these things, and particularly in today's atmosphere, by looking at the private sector and starting something, consulting, or even a startup. And it's very common today. So I think that's been a solution to dealing with these higher costs that you mentioned.
Great. We have an online question. What's next for you all? Where do you want to go in the future and what are your goals? So
I'll take it. I'm not sure I want to answer that. First, to see a lot more grandchildren more frequently. The one who doesn't WhatsApp me as much as the others. I guess I'm going to answer the question before to answer this question. So the Army says it's not just a job, it's an adventure. I think our professions, it's not just a job, it's a vocation. And I view what I do as more a vocation than a job. So the cost element doesn't enter into it. It's a matter of how much you want to invest because it's so much fun. And then as you get older, you are told by your significant other who knows a whole lot better than you, stop having so much fun.
Well, I love these answers. Like my colleagues here, I feel really grateful to have this job that I would do for free. Okay, that's right. Exactly. But in terms of one thing I am excited about, I mentioned that we're going to Chicago, and in the Monday and Tuesday, about mid-May, we have a bus, and we're taking 22 students and 5 faculty and staff, maybe 6. And we're going to visit United Airlines. And if you have ridden on United Airlines, you know that their brand ambassador is Oscar the Grouch, because they are so into waste management and low carbon emissions and alternative fuels. And so I think it's so exciting that we're going to their operations center on Monday, and then we're having a career panel for our students on Monday afternoon, and then we're having a reception at a fancy hotel, restaurant overlooking Millennium Park on Monday night. And then we're going back to United on Tuesday. And then we're going to go visit EPA Region 5 on Tuesday afternoon. And then we're going to go to the top of the Willis Tower. And then we're going to come back. And I mean, that's my job. That's amazing. Somebody's got to do it. And so that's right. But I mean, we're putting our Wisconsin students, faculty, and staff in front of these leading organizations And we're really then bringing their expertise back to campus. So, this idea that we can do things that are a win for the students, their jobs, industry partnerships. I think these ideas of trying to find things that are win-win, that's what I'm looking forward to doing. One of the things coming up.
So what's next for me? In the next couple of days, we're hosting a large corporation in the Energy Institute to talk about what the campus is doing to make bio-based replacements for chemicals that get from fossil fuel. The next day, I'm talking to somebody who's now funding us to figure out how to ferment your whey, W-H-E-Y, into valuable chemicals, right? Because we've pivoted from what we do in Great Lakes Bioenergy to other industrial residues. And this is an agricultural state. So Leo Walsh, who hired me, is probably turning over in his grave to hear that I'm working with the dairy industry when my department chair was concerned I didn't fit into the ag model. Then Friday, I'm going to a Yankee game at AmFam Field, and the Yankees going to win. Then I'm getting on a plane Saturday, and Monday I'm spending a whole day on Capitol Hill talking about the wonderful research that's going on this campus in renewables to promote rural economic development in a state like Wisconsin. And all of those things are fun.
Are there any other questions in the audience? Tom?
This is Tom Jones here. First of all, I want to thank and congratulate the panel for all of your individual and collective contributions this area. I've had the good pleasure of having been able to spend some time on campus and witness it, and it's really pretty impressive. And I do want to give a special call out to Mike, because I remember WI when it was just kind of a grassroots group of faculty members who got together and in the early 2000s, and I really have very fond memories of those times of really trying to imagine what this WI was and what it could be, and here we are today. I mean, it's come a long, long way. That being said, we don't live in an ideal world. I mean, and I think this energy area is just so fundamentally multidisciplinary. I mean, in the broadest sense of the world, and that's come out. And my own observations, and I don't know, you can comment on it, is that universities are great, universal. There's this great opportunity, but it also has this long history and a continuation of being siloed, and we all fight. And Mike, as Mike suggests, sometimes it's in spite of that wonderful things happen. But nevertheless, we can all dream in terms of looking ahead as far as what universities could become. If you had a way or see models of what other universities are doing, what could be done in university environments to further encourage and make this so that it doesn't have to be necessarily done, almost under the scenes or behind the scenes or whatever to do it, in order to make this, I hope, if done right, even more successful than it is today. Any thoughts?
You're wise. That's right. We'll go to our illustrious colleagues who have been here 25% or more. Because we're still on the page.
Well, I mean-
we might get in trouble.
Yeah. No, I'm not on the panel.
Tricks. I mean, this doesn't have to be unique.
Well,
to
I'm not sure what you're asking, other than the fact that for an institution that is arranged from a standpoint of job security, we take much less risk than we should. So I would think, now I have a way around that, but you don't want to hear some of my ideas in that regard. But I think what this institution could do is find ways to essentially allow us to take more risk, because we're really risk averse. It's a very strange situation. We're at a university which, in theory, we have a lot of academic freedom, and yet we're very risk averse. And somehow the institution has got to allow us to take more risk and fail a little bit more, such that we come up with better ideas. That I have ideas, personal ideas about that, but that would get me drummed out of this room, if not the university. But I think
Nothing to lose. Go ahead.
well, I mean, I was at a conference in 2012 with a bunch of industrial types. And one of them, who I thought was quite interesting, argued that tenure should be removed from the university system. And that would make us less risk averse, make us take more risks. And I thought, that's crazy. But as time marches on, I seriously wonder if that's not a way to go. At least in some of the disciplines where there is opportunity out there that you don't take advantage of because you sit and worry about your parking space or the size of your office. But you asked, so.
Well, I think there's this idea of, what's transferable, but I'd say there's a lot of things here at Wisconsin that are not transferable. There's almost no other universities in the world that have an engineering school and an ag school and a letters and sciences and a med school and interdisciplinary law school. Right. In fact, I was on the search committee for the vice chancellor of research, and this came up, and I think they said the only two schools we don't have are architecture and veterinarian, maybe dental. And like, we have a vet school. Of course we do. Yeah. The dental school and an architecture school. We have everything else. And so I think the idea is that we can do things here that other universities can't do. And not every university has to be a powerhouse in energy. I mean, there are different universities have their own strengths, but I think energy is something that we can do. It is a global challenge. We are doing it. And I think trying to double down on making this really something where Wisconsin is known around the world as a hotspot on energy, I think would be an exciting direction.
Yeah, I'll just try a very brief answer that's based in a four-letter word. And that four-letter word is time. We have brilliant students, energetic students, brilliant colleagues, and there's a lot of opportunity out there, but most people just don't have the time to even think about grabbing the brass ring because of all the other things that are part of this wonderful day job that we have. So if the institution could do something to create time, or if the med school can figure out how we can live on 2 hours of sleep a day instead of 8 hours of sleep a day, the time is the big, you don't know how many times you talk to somebody and they say, yeah, but I just don't have the time.
All right. So there are 3 more questions online, and I'm just going to pose all 3 of them, and then you could just decide if you want to answer one of them. Okay. Since we're running short on time here. So in the age of cyber warfare, what are the advantages of distributed energy systems? When will we see fusion energy supply? And then the last one is, what are your reactions to UW-Madison's new sustainability goals, net zero by 2048? And how do you anticipate UW-Madison will reach those energy goals? So if anybody wants to answer any of those 3 questions. So cyber warfare, which is linked to advantages of distributed energy systems. When will we see a fusion energy supply, and reaction to UW-Madison sustainability goals?
Well, maybe I'll start with the sustainability goals. And I think it's exciting and great. And I think part of that sustainability initiative is the chancellor just announced this RISE initiative, where we'll be hiring, I think, 80 new faculty around sustainability themes. And I think in terms of, we're here celebrating Mike's effort to bring faculty together. And it has been transformative. Each hire to this university is transformative to it. To bring in 80 new faculty, this is going to be amazing. And so, I think that the operational goals of the university go hand in hand with our educational goals, our research initiatives. And I just feel like this is the direction that the world is heading in. And it's great to see Wisconsin as a leader in this space.
Thank you.
What are the 3 questions?
Well, we'll just let Tracy have answered that one. Fusion energy might be one.
She answered sustainability,
She
so
answered-
I don't have to.
Yeah,
so I
you don't have to
that.
answer that one.
Oh,
You
good,
could
good,
answer
good.
fusion
is 30
energy.
years out.
All right. There we go.
No, I'm partly teasing. Paul Wilson left, and I was going to make him answer this one. But I think what's interesting about the campus, probably people aren't aware of this, there's 3 startup companies here. It was in the New York Times, actually. There's 3 startup companies here looking at various aspects of fusion technology. Shine was a startup company in medical technology, but is now transferring a lot of what they're doing in terms of their underlying science into fusion. So I think there's a lot of activity here, more than people would first imagine. We've been a leader in this for at least 45 years, 50 years. I don't even remember what the third one was.
The other one is distributed energy systems, advantages of distributed energy systems.
Yeah, I think
Tom? no, go ahead.
maybe you can answer that better than I can, Tom. But no, I think distributed energy has a great future. And with the advent of AI and other things, I think it's a great thing. I don't think, if I can say this maybe out of class, but the utilities are pushing quite hard and are going along enough with our distributed energy potential in the state. So I think we need to do some work there. But I want to answer something about the time issue. For me, a couple years off at an institute in Vienna, I don't know what's happened to the sabbatical system at the university. I can't even talk about that anybody. I don't think it exists. But in the old days, that was a tremendous way to answer the time issue, because you every so many years or so you could disassociate yourself from all the committees and all the obligations. So I think there's something that. The other thing I wanted to say was, there should be a bigger pool of funds. I don't know, it comes from the foundation or for sort of high risk sort of things. I do a little work with the Union of Concerned Scientists, and there's a certain part of that budget that they do a lot of practical advocacy work, as maybe you know, the Union of Concerned Scientists. But there's a good part of the budget that goes what they call over the horizon. And that's just a word, sort of things that projects. They're a little more speculative and so on. And I could tell you some real success stories that came out of funding some small over-the-horizon projects. So I would hope that maybe something like that could be done at the university, which would get at your the risk issue that you mentioned. Otherwise, we're following the leader and getting these grants.
So we're really at the end of time. We had a little bit of a chance for folks here to have some final comments from our panelists, and then we're going to do a word cloud poll using Mentimeter. So get out your cell phones to help answer a question there, but I'll turn it to the panelists for any final comments or words that you'd like to share.
I would just say that the things that we've talked about are very encouraging for me as an old timer, that there's a great future for the university, exemplified by the people sitting here and people sitting out there. The thing I would enjoy most about what I'm going to do when I grow up is that I can interact still with students, and still I can kibitz with people from the Energy Institute or from the program. And that's the greatest joy I have in my professional life right now.
Well, maybe my closing thought is to say that, you've heard a lot today about our EAP program, but for some reason, many people still don't know that it's out there. So if you are a graduate student, please consider it. And if you have friends or students, our website is eap.wisc.edu. And it does not require usually any extra time in graduate school, no extra money, and it's awesome. So that's my final thought.
So my final thought goes back to the word time. And I wish I could turn the clock back. I wish I was 20 years old and thinking about all the potential that you all on the audience in the room have to make a difference in this space, to leave a better future than we have today. And I encourage you all to follow your nose and think about that as you're 20 years old. Boy, I wish I was a first-year graduate student again.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you taking the time to share your wisdom and your insights with us. It's been an honor to have the chance to have this conversation with you. So thank you so much. Let's give them. All right. So we are going to, if you please, the way that this works is you can, focus your phone on that QR code, and that we're answering the question, what do you envision as the future of energy? So if you can manage to do that and then just start to type in some of your ideas, and they'll start to show in a live way to the group what we're envisioning.
You can't steal your answer from ChatGPT.
Yeah, I can see that.
Should I close out the QR code or? Pull it right below. Oops, no.
Right, I think we might be kind of nearing the end on additions to that. Did you guys have there's some more more?
Yeah, so we
Questions?
have some more questions. If folks want to leave right now, we just have a few sort of feedback questions for the forum as a whole. So we'll show that once people need to leave and clear out, but we appreciate any feedback about this forum series in general, and appreciate all of our panelists and Mary for your insights.
Right, great. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate that, and we'll be documenting this. This is great. Thank you.
For those online, if there's a few other questions, so feel free to add your responses to those questions.